is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop.
Got it.
Stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
No education.
Yeah, you know, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
Welcome to it. It's Thursday, my friends. The Steve Gruber Show. A lot going on, to say the least. Apparently, Donald Trump made some comments, but the source is questionable. So, saying basically that Carly Fiorina would not win as president of the United States because of the way she looks. But it's published in Rolling Stone magazine, which has no credibility. None. So there's the problem with that, and we're going to get back onto that in just a moment here. We're also going to talk. We're going to talk about planned terrorist attacks against the Koch brothers and others, all in the shadow of the Iran deal, which just 21% of Americans support. 21%. And then a little bit of fun later. We'll reveal the fastest performance car of 2015 with Car and Driver magazine here on the program today. So we'll enjoy that. We'll enjoy a little drive around the park. But let's go ahead and start with the power rankings for the Republican candidates, just released, by the way. The power rankings just released by USA Today. Today. Yeah, I know. At any rate, let's see. The Donald stays in first place, but the big winner this week is Carly Fiorina. She has moved up 3 spots again. So the top 3 in the power rankings from USA Today: Donald Trump, Ben Carson, Carly Fiorina. Only 2 candidates made significant moves up: Carly Fiorina and John Kasich. Kasich now in 7th position, climbing steadily. He started out of the top 10. Now he's at number 7. Seems to pick up a spot every week. The big loser this week, Marco Rubio. Marco falling from number 3 position to the 6th position. And again, this is all in USA Today. Here's part of what they wrote in their article. If Donald Trump was looking in his rearview mirror, he'd see Carly Fiorina gaining on him fast. The former Hewlett-Packard CEO has had several good weeks, and political experts now have her in 3rd place in the 2016 power rankings in the 2nd week of our rankings. Our panel has Fiorina moving up from 6th position to 3rd, while Florida Senator Marco Rubio drops from 3rd to 6th. And what has changed since last week? Well, more awareness of stronger candidates like Carly Fiorina, said talk show host and former presidential candidate Herman Cain. She's moved up, and rightly so. Deb Lucia, Kansas Tea Party activist, agreed. The biggest winner this week is Fiorina. The CNN debate controversy put her in the spotlight, and that's after her great performance on August the 6th in the first debate. That's me. While the rest of the field has largely held their positions, the next couple of weeks are likely to have a significant impact on the standings. For example, Emory University professor Andra Gillespie said, looking ahead, it will be interesting to see if Mike Huckabee can generate any additional support in the polls as a result of the earned media he's getting for supporting Kim Davis in Kentucky. Davis is the Kentucky County Clerk who went to jail rather than issue marriage licenses to gay couples, and you better hope that the GOP looks away from social issues to fiscal issues and foreign policy. That's where they need to be looking. Social issues are well, they're just not good for the GOP, as you well know. So we'll try to avoid that going forward. Because if we get stuck in that same quagmire of social issues, the Republicans do not do well. You know it, and I know it. At any rate. A notorious Al-Qaeda magazine is encouraging lone wolf terrorist attacks on U.S. economic leaders, including Bill Gates, Michael Bloomberg, and Warren Buffett. The list in Inspire magazine also included industrialist brothers Charles and David Koch, international entrepreneur Larry Ellison, and casino magnate Sheldon Adelson. A prominent economist was also on the list but asked that his name be withheld. Also pictured was Jim Walton, one of the heirs of the Walmart fortune, although he was misidentified in the caption as his late father, Sam Walton. Several other names in the list were also misspelled. The slickly produced magazine article begins with a photo illustration showing blood-spattered pictures of several of the leaders next to a dripping gun. Its stated goal is to derail the revival of the American economy. The article says the economic personalities and wealthy entrepreneurs can get off the list by withdrawing their money from U.S. banks, investing their wealth outside American soil, and denouncing support for Israel. Oh, really? Just denounce everything you are? Oh, then that should work. Avid Coleman of Flashpoint Intelligence and NBC News counterterrorism analyst said that while much of the magazine's content is somewhat aspirational, it has also played a role in actual plots. There is compelling evidence from the Boston Marathon bombings and other various thwarted terror plots that homegrown jihadists have specifically looked to the magazine for guidance on what targets to attack and have taken that advice quite seriously and quite literally. So I suppose we better take it quite seriously and quite literally as well. This is at least the second time that U.S. financial leaders have been named specifically as targets by Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Inspire 13, issued in late December 2014, also included Bill Bernanke and Bill Gates as potential targets. Huh. Makes you wonder what's going on. But they still use the cell phones and the equipment designed by people like Bill Gates, but then they want to attack. Speaking of which, Apple has unveiled a whole lot of brand new stuff. The iPad Pro, bigger, better, 12.9-inch display, 5.6 million pixels, but it works with a pencil stylus. It's a tool, by the way, Steve Jobs once described as well, yuck. Nobody wants a stylus. Well, apparently Apple wants it now. It works 1.5 times faster than the last iPad Air 2. And the top of the line is only about $1,100. $1,100 for an iPad. Wow. It's Thursday on the Steve Gruber Show. We'll be right back.
The Steve Gruber Show. American values with Midwestern common sense.
Ain't seen nothing yet. But baby, you just ain't seen nothing yet. It's something that you're never gonna forget.
All right, welcome back to the program. In and around the capital city, the search is on for a hit-and-run driver who left a Lansing firefighter dead during a Fill the Boot event to raise money for muscular dystrophy. Lansing Police Chief Michael Yankowski says, "We believe that this was not an accident. This was not an accident, and that the actions of this individual were intentional." Apparently a hit and run. Firefighters were collecting donations at Jolly and Cedar on the south side of the city when Rodman was struck. Dennis Rodman died as a result of that accident. He was pronounced dead a short time later at the hospital. A 22-year-old man apprehended in connection with the incident after a car chase, a foot chase, and a struggle with police. Police are holding him on probable cause for open murder and felony fleeing and eluding. The evidence will be presented to the prosecutor's office this morning. The man's name not yet released. Chief Yankowski, asking for anybody else that might know anything about it to contact police. Rodman, who is 35, is survived by his wife. They are expecting their first child. His death a big loss to the department, says Fire Chief Randall Telefaro. So just an unfortunate story, and you wonder why he would have been targeted. Makes not a lot of sense, does it? We'll keep an eye on that story for you going forward. By the way, the debt has been stuck at $18 trillion for 175 days. $18 trillion, 175 days. It's a miracle. The American debt hasn't changed. It's a beautiful thing. And it happens to be the portion of the federal debt that is subject to the legal limit set by Congress. And it closed this past Friday at $18,112,975,000,000, according to the latest daily Treasury statement, which was published at 4 o'clock Tuesday. 175 straight days, the debt subject to the limit has been frozen exactly the same. Makes you wonder what it really is. It's about $25 million below the current legal debt limit. On July the 30th, Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew sent a letter to the leaders of Congress saying he was extending a debt issuance suspension period through October 30th. That means the Treasury believes it can continue for at least the next 7 weeks to issue daily Treasury statements that show the federal debt subject to the limit beginning and ending each day frozen just below that limit. It's a scam. It is a scam. And you have to consider, why are they doing this? Two top Senate investigators floated the idea of immunity Tuesday to Brian Pagliano, the staffer who set up the email server in former Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton's home in exchange for testimony about her activities. Mr. Pagliano last week said he would assert his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination by refusing to answer questions about the matter, but Senators Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson, the chairman of two key committees investigating the situation, said they have authority to extend immunity if Mr. Pagliano is willing to talk. They proposed a proffer session where Mr. Pagliano would let them know what he knows in an off-the-record setting, and all sides could then decide what steps to take. The committees have the authority to obtain an immunity order to acquire the information they need while also protecting your right against self-incrimination, the two senators wrote in a letter to Mr. Pagliano's lawyer. Not good news for Hillary Clinton. If Mr. Pagliano sings, it's over. The senators would need to coordinate with the Justice Department in order to secure an immunity deal. Their offer raises the stakes for Pagliano and could create more peril for Hillary, who has insisted she complied with all laws when operating the server. You don't believe that, and neither do I. She finally said she was actually sorry about it on ABC News this week. We heard that. But do we really buy into it? We'll take a moment now and go to the hotlines. 888-900-9966 is the number. 888-900-9966 is the hotline number. Steve is on the line. Steve, welcome to the program.
Good morning. 2 points. First of all, that woman's not sorry for anything except for getting caught.
True.
Second of all, the other thing is whatever happened to Bill and putting the presidential whatever up for sale with that nuclear deal that he was trying to cut, and that kind of just dropped right off the radar.
So low, in fact, I have no idea what you're referring to.
You were talking about the presidential, the presidency up for sale through an abuse of power. Something about uranium and the Russians, or this is like something 2 months ago that came and went real quick.
Yep.
And you don't know what I'm talking about either.
I'm doing my best here, buddy. But see, here the problem is. You know what the problem is? There's so many scandals flying around, Stevie. I can't keep up with every scandal, for God's sake. I could spend 3 hours a day talking about Hillary's scandals. I mean, honestly, you know that, and so do I, right?
I'm sorry to say you're right, but yeah,
it's sad.
Bill was in this. I can't remember it, but it was.
Let me give you an example. Real quick, let me give you an example, Steve. Yeah, I understand. Let me give you an example. The State Department failed to turn over 70 pages of documents to the Associated Press that it was instructed to do by a federal judge. They broke the law. There's just one headline we could spend, half an hour on. We just don't have time. We're doing the best we can. By God, though, it's the Steve Gruber Show.
Getting your day started with news from around the state and around the world. Common Sense Radio. This is the Steve Gruber Show.
All right, let's lighten up for a minute. Let's lighten up for just a moment. Because it's something we haven't talked about yet this week. And it's worthy of talking about. I mean, Ivy's all giddy about it, so I figured, if she's giddy, then, all right, so she's not giddy, but we are going tailgating on Saturday. I don't know you're a foodie in a tailgate place. I mean, let's be honest, people talk about tailgate food all the time, right?
Yes, wings and ribs and all kinds of good stuff. But it's interesting, a couple of years ago you had taken me for the first time to a really...
Which I find incredible, by the way. You grew up in Florida State, University of Florida, all sorts of, great football teams in Miami that your stepdad's all into.
They're huge Miami fans.
But you've never been to a tailgate party until I took her to a Michigan State University tailgate party a couple of years ago. She's walking around like a little kid with her eyes as big as dinner plates.
And a big giant smile, because everyone's, really pumped and into, what's going on. And so it's definitely a new experience for me, but I loved it. So, yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it.
All right, well, let me tell you a couple stories here. When I grew up not far from the shadow of Spartan Stadium in East Lansing, I was regaled with stories of the 1966 Spartan team and the game of the century. Both of my parents graduated from Michigan State University, but it was my mother. It was my mother that really seemed to be a fan of the green and white. She'd gone to class with Bubba Smith, so she had some passing familiarity with him. I remember sitting mesmerized by the radio at the age of 7, listening intently to WJIM-AM, the flagship station, by the way, of this program. But I was 7 years old, and the Spartans were playing at home. You see, back in those days, you didn't get to watch, every game that you desired on television. If you were lucky, you had a local broadcast on the radio of the local football team, which we had every week, of course. Back then, JIM was the Spartan station. It still is. And back in 1973, the Spartans were taking on number one Ohio State. The Buckeyes were in town. They were big. They were bad. They were undefeatable. Well, wrong. Because I remember my mother going crazy. I remember the play-by-play as long as I live. Again, I was 7. Levi Jackson, I think, was the guy's name. And he took off late in the game. The Spartans were behind and took off on, a long run anyhow that will live in my memory forever. Maybe my earliest memory of college football. The Spartans shocked Woody Hayes and the world with an amazing 16-13 win. My mother, God bless her, squealed like a little girl that day and danced around the living room. What an incredible fall afternoon it was in my home. I'm not kidding you. And I will remember that day as long as we had one of those big Zenith all-in-one turntable stereo. You know what I'm talking about, with the speakers. It was like a piece of furniture that had speakers and stuff and knobs and a record player that was really crappy, frankly, but the radio was good. And I remember looking outside in the fall colors, and anyhow, Woody Hayes was embarrassed up in East Lansing by the Spartans that day. Many years later, my brother headed to the school down the road, and in the fall of 1976, he took me to the student section at the Big House. Michigan beat Wisconsin that day 35-0. I can tell you exactly pretty much everything from that day because I remember it all for some reason. And then, you know, my view of college football changed that day forever. College football, the greatest game ever invented, was forever altered in my world. And at that point, I lost touch with my Spartan roots, at least for a while. And growing up, 15 minutes from Spartan Stadium, like I said, I was nearly alone in my support for the blue team. I remember walking out of my house in disgust in 1978, again listening to the radio, again on WJIM AM, because Eddie Smith and Kirk, my mother was there. Gosh darn her, she was there again. I remember this. It was the same piece of equipment that I had listened to 5 years earlier. And Eddie Smith and Kurt Gibson had just worked over the Wolverines. Wolverines weren't supposed to be touched. The Spartans were on probation at that time. And so, anyhow, Eddie Smith, Kurt Gibson, and that team of Spartans slapped the Wolverines around 24-15 in East Lansing. And I knew it was over, not by listening to the radio, because I was outside, and I lived out in the country not too far from the interstate, from I-96. And all the cars on the highway began wildly honking their horns. This is the stuff you remember of childhood, man. And I was crushed because I knew I had to go to school on Monday, and all those little rotten Spartan fans were going to give me just a world of hell, which they did, and rightfully so. Anyhow, I've gone back and forth in recent years and find myself rooting for either of the big home teams. This coming weekend, however, will mark the biggest football game in Spartan Stadium since number 1 and number 2 played all the way back in 1966 when Notre Dame came to town undefeated, ranked number 1, and Michigan State was in town, ranked number 2. It ended in a 10-10 tie. You've heard it. It's the first time, in fact, a pair of top 10 teams have met in East Lansing since. Number 7 Oregon will be here to square up against number 5 Michigan State for a game under the lights on primetime TV. I won't have to listen to the radio this time, but I might just for fun. I'll be a Spartan fan this weekend, make no mistake. And I respect the way this team got here. Hard work, desire, and a pile of discipline. That is the American way. So today I take my hat off to Coach Mark D'Antonio and the incredible amount of leadership and work it has taken to rebuild a once great program to national prominence once again. It only took about 50 years, but hey, good things are worth waiting for.